Okay, so let's go over the rules. First, you have to spend $30 million in 30 days, right?
Simple. Yeah, simple.
Yeah, no problem. And you can't have any assets at the end of the 30 days. So anything that, generates income, you're not allowed to have. You have to just show on your back, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then what's the next rule? You can't destroy anything that's inherently valuable either. So
Right.
you can't buy something and then destroy it.
You can only give 5% to charity. You can only gamble 5%
and then
of
you can gamble 5% away. And you can also hire people, but you have to give value for their services. So you can hire people to be like, a servant or whatever, like a security guard, or you can hire someone to be, someone to play catch with you in your penthouse.
Yeah.
But like I said, you gotta have value. So what else? What's some other rules? You can't tell anybody why you have to spend the money. So you gotta keep it a secret. What am I missing? There's another one I'm thinking of.
You've got to keep receipts, right?
Oh, right. Yeah, you got to make sure everything's accounted for.
Yeah. Okay. And obviously, like you can't have a penny to your name. I think that's the main thing. That's the tough question, I think, with that kind of offer. Is like, well, how do you spend it on other people without it coming back to me and without it affecting me in like a positive way or going to my bank account?
It's a challenge. It'd be really hard to do. But I want to ask you, how would you spend $30 million in 30 days? And there's no wishing for more wishes. How would you do
Ixnay on that? Well, I like the idea of like hiring a bunch of people. Maybe we could hire a bunch of people and like buy a bunch of wood and things that would build houses. Hire a bunch of people, a construction team, pay them like a certain amount for a month, and just have them build like a house for somebody. I don't know if would that count as cheating. Like it doesn't, like we build the house, all the money goes into building that. You hire all these people, you pay them. That would be one thing.
As long as you don't own it at the end, right? If it's maybe somebody else's name or something.
Yeah, buy it for people that are looking for houses, people that are living in like low income, like apartments, like they're cramped. Just buy it.
Pretty good idea.
Pay everybody and just build. And again, you could pay so many people. You could pay so many people to build houses in different parts of the neighborhood, different parts of the city, stuff like that. So yeah, I think if that's not cheating, that was one thing I would do, because once you build the house, the person would sign up with the electricity, they would sign up with the mortgage company, all that other stuff. So yeah, that's something that I would do. How would you spend the money if you had to do that?
Well, the first thing I would do is wish for more wishes.
You just said that you can't do that.
Well, I can. You can't, but I can't.
You just made up the rules to say that I can't?
I'm just changing the rules as I go, man.
That's not fair. You're like an 80s comedy script writer.
No, I would hire you to I'd hire you to do a podcast with me. That's what I would do.
Oh, okay. And you put me on the spot to see what I would do, and then you're just doing things that like would end up benefit because you're changing the rules. Like I don't know. I don't know about this, man.
Welcome back to NostalgiaCast. I'm Johnny Craddock.
And I'm Darin Lundberg.
And today we're going to talk about Brewster's Millions, a Walter Hill movie, 1985, starring Richard Pryor and John Candy. And then, of course, Rick Moranis has a cameo in there, which is pretty fun.
Got to mention him.
Yeah. But before we go into that, let's quickly recap our last episode. I believe we did, American Tail with, what was it, Rob?
Robert Yanis Jr., of the Crooked Table Productions. We, again, friend of mine on Twitter, we brought him on, or again, I reached out and said, well, I appeared on your podcast. Would you like to appear on our? And he was all for it. So he picked American Tail. And again, it's fun when we bring on guests and they just get it. They jibe with, it reminds me of when I brought you the idea for NostalgiaCast. It's like what I would do the Jazz Singer first. And I explained this and you went, I would do Clash of the Titans because it meant to me. And I was like, you get it. Like, that's great. I'm glad I picked you as a podcast partner. So again, Rob was, he's one of those guys that he got it and he ran with it. And so we chatted about the Don Bluth movie from 1986. Obviously he came down on the good side of it because, it's a good, fun animated movie. It's like the not anti-Disney, but it's, they tried to make a movie to compete with Disney movies at the time. And I think we talked about how that was probably the most successful movie that Don Bluth did. And then how I came down on it's worth remembering just because it is a good, fun story. It does tell a story about like an immigrant family that comes over and all the stuff that they deal with. And, it has charming things from Dom DeLuise, even though he's playing his normal self, or, it has fun little songs and things like that. So it works as a musical. How did you come down on it?
Well, I agreed. It should have been remembered. I really enjoyed aspects of it. I liked it had that heart, it had that, that through line with that story of the, trying to find his family, and that heartwarming, ending that it had. And I also think Madeline Kahn was great. So
yeah,
I really
as always. Yeah. So again, we love having guests on. We love being able to talk about these movies and share in the fun and, what these movies meant to people as kids. And so, yeah, that was a great conversation. I enjoy that. And I hope to have him back on fairly soon.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's get into Brewster's Millions. But before we do that, let's go ahead and watch the trailer.
Money. Everyone wants it. Until now, Monty Brewster didn't have it.
They tell me you're my only living relative.
But he just made money the old-fashioned way.
You have 30 days in which to spend $30 million.
He inherited it.
If you can do it, you get $300 million. But if you fail, you don't get diddly.
Why can't I tell my friends?
Because I don't want anybody to help me out.
What's wrong? Spike, what's wrong? $30 million. The manager's got $30 million given to him. This is a good day,
He can't keep it unless he can spend it and have nothing left but the shirt on his back.
Well, we're going to have a lot of fun with this kind of money.
Jake, I'd like to hire you as my official photographer. Salary $10,000 a week. How would you like to be my personal driver for the next 30 days at $5,000 a week?
What a country. America, love it.
Hey, everybody, anybody want to go to lunch?
Everyone thinks he's crazy.
I want to bet $50,000. It went up. We'll sell it.
I think we should consider the possibility of psychiatric help.
At the rate you're going, you'll have spent your entire inheritance in less than a month, and you'll have nothing to show for it.
But $300 million says he's right on the money. Richard Pryor and John Candy.
It's like that old saying, for money I'd be a millionaire. I'm a millionaire.
Brewster's Millions. Coming soon from Universal Pictures.
Okay, so Brewster's Millions, 1985, directed by Walter Hill. He's known for directing movies like 48 Hours, and he did Red Heat. He also directed, what was it, Last Man Standing?
Streets of Fire is a good one. That's a weird 80s rock violent musical. It's great. I love that one. Southern Comfort, another one.
Yeah, he also did one called Crossroads I really like, and that's starring Ralph Macchio. It's on my list for the podcast, so maybe we'll talk about it later, but it's got Ralph Macchio and Steve Vai in it. And Ralph Macchio sells his soul to the devil to play guitar. And at the end of the movie, he has to have this like guitar battle with Steve Vai, and Steve Vai is basically the devil. And it's a pretty fun movie if you like Steve Vai and Ralph Macchio.
Right.
And Walter Hill.
Walter Hill.
But so Brewster's Millions, I chose this one because this, like so many other movies we've talked about on our podcast, this was a staple of my house growing up. We watched this one a lot. It was always on. And so I was very familiar with it, and I always really enjoyed watching it. And I want to say this, I think the reason why I, like so many others, like this movie is because you're able to put yourself in Monty's shoes. That's like the biggest thing. You can what would you do in that situation? How would you spend the money? What would your plan be to, waste $30 million in 30 days? And so while you're watching it, you're imagining how would you do it? And so I think that's why it's so appealing for so many people. I mean that, and it's also got Richard Pryor in it. And that's one of the main draws for me too, is Richard Pryor. He, I think, is a very, gifted comedian. And even though, his stand-up is very crude and, kind of on the blue side, this movie, it's very tame. And so I really enjoy seeing Richard Pryor be funny, but be tame and more mild and more, more family friendly.
Yeah.
But I don't really have much to say about the history. Like I say, it was on all the time, something we always watched. And so I was always really familiar with this movie. But do you have a history of this movie? Did you see it in the theater? Did you how did you experience it the first time?
Well, my history with it, I've known of this movie for a long time. I'm not, Richard Pryor was a little before my time. I know we talked about him during our Silver Streak episode, and he was if I remember correctly, he was the high point of that movie for me. I mean, the movie was fine, and then once he showed up in that movie, it lit up like dynamite. Like it became this like crackerjack, high energy, like really funny. Like it just became like a different. It reminded me of, like Aladdin. It's a fine movie, but when Robin Williams comes into it, it becomes like a next level kind of experience. Yeah. And so I remember Silver Streak being that. So I've known of Richard Pryor, and I've always liked him, but I think Eddie Murphy was more my speed when I was growing up.
Okay.
But Eddie Murphy, one of his idols was Richard Pryor. And so even though I know Richard Pryor from Superman 3, obviously, because that's the kind of kid that I am. But this movie, I've known of it. And I think the only thing I really knew, especially watching the movie, when Rick Moranis shows up as that huckster or whatever.
Do some business. I'll kick some butt around here.
All right, let's kick some butt around here. What? Who the hell am I? I'm Morty King, king of the mimics, that's who. Anything you say, I guarantee it'll be repeated. I'm like an Xerox machine.
And he's like copying everybody. And it's like, would you shut up? He goes, would you shut up? I was like, I remember that from the trailer. Like, so I know the trailer by heart, but I'd never actually seen this movie. So no real history with it, no real history with any of the adaptations of the novel or anything like that.
Okay. Well, speaking of Rick Moranis real quick, he seems to be popping up in our conversations a lot recently. Yeah. And I think that's kind of funny that he's, something we always talk about, but I really like him as a character actor. I think he's really good. And I wish that his character was in the movie more often. I wish that, Richard Pryor, Monty, had hired him to do that or something, or to, give him, because he's hiring all these people to play all these different roles in his life and to spend his money. It would have been great had he just gave Rick Moranis' character a job.
Yeah, well, that was the interesting thing, because especially talking about Ghostbusters 2 just a couple of weeks ago, and then talking about Rick Moranis, you just, when you see him, you expect him to be in more of the movie. It was kind of weird, and it's not the fault of the movie itself. I can't do that, but you expect him. Oh, it's Rick Moranis, and then he's gone. He's just a little bit part. That made me laugh more because it was Rick Moranis than anything.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, he's hiring all these. Monty's hiring all these people, but then he doesn't hire him. That was just there's just a lot of different directions that the movie went into, especially with me being my first time and not being nostalgic for it and not being a staple, like you said, in my household. It didn't go. There are so many directions I could have seen it going in different ways, but it never did that. And so that kind of kept taking me out of the movie, which we'll talk about. But again, you saying it was a family staple, I think that's interesting, because one of the things I want to talk about is Richard Pryor never really being able to find his footing in movies. I know Eddie Murphy has Beverly Hills Cop and 48 Hours and The Golden Child, and he was Eddie Murphy in those movies. And Richard Pryor, I think, had more of a difficult road to try and make a statement for himself in films.
Yeah, but like you say, Eddie Murphy being Eddie Murphy, I think Richard Pryor was being Richard Pryor in this movie too. He was just being who he was, and that's what made it so great.
Yeah. The thing about Richard Pryor, from what I know of him, and again, his comedy it's funny. It's not like one of those things that's lost on me. It was just I wasn't as familiar with it as, say, Eddie Murphy. But he was very confrontational about race, and he was very open, and he dealt with these topics that were very rough, but he was very good-natured about it. I don't know if that makes sense from what I've seen. Like I said, I'm no expert. I don't want to come on here and say that I know everything about Richard Pryor when I don't. I just know about his history and his little bit of his stand-up. But again, it's very good-natured stand-up, even though he's really concentrating on some hard-hitting topics. Yeah. And so again, this is going to sound terrible. As a white person that doesn't have the Black experience and can only look at it from the outside, it makes you aware of it, and it makes you want to be better, because he's treating it in a way that's like, oh, this is bad, but it's funny because it's so stupid, and that's your in as someone who doesn't. Does that make sense? You're not able to see it from his perspective, but you can understand him and empathize what he's going through, and that's something that I really, really like about his comedy.
Yeah, and I think too, in the situation that he's in this movie, it allows him to be super eccentric and kind of go places that you wouldn't normally go. And so I think that also makes it interesting and fun to watch. Yeah,
and it's like race never plays a big part in this movie. It's never something that's like the driving force. And so it's not, so it is Richard Pryor. It's just not very it's a good PG rated movie. It's very good natured, and it's easy, and he's charming. Like there are moments where I was like, yeah, Richard Pryor, even though he was like this hard hitting controversial comedian, he could be very warm and charming and welcoming on screen, and you're like, oh, I like this guy, I'd want to spend time with this guy. And even seeing him in real life, he's, again, just like Robin Williams, like they're very appreciative of each other. You see them, you've seen clips of them together, and they raise each other up, and Jerry Seinfeld even called him like one of his idols. It's like they are all very appreciative of each other, all these comedians, and they were all, I don't know, part of a community it was just fun to be a part of, it seemed like. And so that's a good legacy, I think.
So had you seen his other movies like Stir Crazy and what's the other one that I can think of that he's well known? Oh, Hear No Evil, See No Evil, another great one that I like, Richard Pryor in.
See, again, the only movie I really knew him from was Superman 3, again, just because it's Superman. And that's one of the things I'm talking about, because Richard Pryor, it's a weird movie because they make it a Richard Pryor movie instead of a Superman movie. And again, he's fine in it, but it kind of throws off the balance of, well, why can't I just watch a Richard Pryor movie? Why do I have to watch like something with Superman in it? And his pairings with Gene Wilder, they're a good comedy team, but I'd never seen, I think today I still haven't seen See No Evil, Hear No Evil. I've seen Stir Crazy, Silver Streak. I think that was the maybe one of the first times that I'd seen that. I can't remember. But yeah, I wasn't, like I said, wasn't full on familiar with any of his movies really.
I do agree with you. I think he's great with Gene Wilder, but I think he's doing a great job with John Candy too. And I think John Candy really kind of lifts him up in this movie as well. They kind of have a nice dynamic in this movie.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you another question, even though I know you talked about how, you can see yourself in that situation. Again, me being outside of it and kind of looking at the movie from the outside in, because I have no attachment to it. What are some other, and maybe you can explain to me why you or even if the movie stands up today as much as it did back then, but what are some other things that really made this a nostalgic movie for you?
Well, I do think it still stands up. And like I said before, it's a fantasy. You can put yourself in his shoes and you can fantasize about what you would do with the money and how you would spend it. And then to see what he does with it, it's like, oh, that's a good idea. Or I would have done something different, Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what I would do exactly with that kind of money or how I would get myself through that situation. But it really is just fun to see him go through it and kind of like live through his eyes, through that character's eyes.
Okay. So did you think like the movie had a point and said that point well, or what do you think the movie was
it makes
about?
That point in the beginning, right? Like he wants him to learn to hate spending money and to appreciate, what you get for money, the value you get for things and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I appreciate that part of it. But again, I just like the eccentric nature of the character and just the fact that he has to accomplish his goal and everyone is against him and no one knows why he's doing it. And it's just a fun situation to see. And also the fact that Richard Pryor doing it, that's also makes it fun for me.
Yeah. Again, it's a likable movie. There's nothing really negative I have to say about it, other than to me, it's more innocuous. It kind of slid off everything. I mean, it's a nice, pleasant, it's like a 90, 100-minute movie. And so it goes smoothly, and there's never a point where I was checking my watch, because it just goes from thing to thing, and it's very
it's nothing special. There's nothing flashy. It's just very straightforward. It just kind of tells the story, and it's kind of, that's one thing that I had a problem with actually, was the end of the movie, because there was no third act. He wins the 300 million, and then it's like he walks out the door and the movie ends, and there's that quote at the end, and then that's it. So there's no like denouement, there's no like resolution of you don't see him go off with Miss Drake. You don't see any of that really, and so that was always a problem for me.
That's a note that I had. Like, he walks off after punching Stephen Collins in the face, and then he hires her on Angela, and then they walk off, and then does the iris out, and the credits just start. And I'm like, what? That's it? Like, we don't get to see what happens after. It was just like, oh, okay.
You need that denouement to kind of like, just, I don't know, you want to be in his shoes. So you want to like feel that same thing. Like, oh, we did it. We accomplished our goal, and now we can go enjoy our lives or whatever.
Yeah.
But
okay.
So I wanted to talk about this real quick. There were a couple of things also that in the movie took me out of the movie. And the first thing that took me out was when he first meets Warren Cox, and he wins Warren over, by asking him to be like his interior decorator or whatever. And then as he's leaving, he turns to the camera and he breaks the fourth wall, and he says, "What an a-hole."
That was a real.
And it's just kind of funny to me. It's like, what was the point of that? That's the only time that ever happens in the movie. It never happens again. And it just always takes me out whenever he does that. And I don't know why they chose to have him break the fourth wall like that.
All I can really think is that it's Richard Pryor, and it's just a moment where it's a crowd pleasing, like, oh yeah, this, it's the black man, pointing out what yuppie a-holes these white guys are. And so that may be the only part that I thought was Richard Pryor, like there's his personality as the stand-up comedian. And I imagine that audiences at the time would have just found that uproarious.
I wish they would have kept it going though. You know what I mean? If they're going to do it, then do it throughout. If you're going to do it just once and that's it, don't put it in there at all. Like just leave it out. We don't need that. He can just talk to himself. He can mumble under his breath as he walks away, what an a-hole. And then that'd be the same effect. You know what I mean?
Right.
You don't need to have him break the fourth wall like that. And you go, what? We're watching a movie?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, this is a movie.
Yeah, that was interesting. I did write that. Oh, there's a fourth wall break. Okay. And so it's just one of those things like, all right. Like it didn't, like I said, I really had having no attachment to the movie. It didn't throw me off as much.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you said. You had some other things that threw you.
Well, the other thing is about the actual money he has to spend, right? He has to spend $30 million, but because his friends keep making him money, John Candy makes him 10 million. He places these bets where he wins the bet, and so he wins another 1.5 million. So he actually spends more than 30 million. So that's always bothered me. It's like he didn't really spend 30 million. He spent like 41.5 million or whatever it was, and plus he spends that 20,000 twice, because at the end when Warren withholds it and then gives it back to him. So really he spent like way over $40 million. And so that's always bothered me, because it really isn't just 30 million that he spent.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
Let's see, what else? I can't think right now, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, the first thing that I noticed is the first big laugh that I had is when, they're playing baseball in the field and then they have to call timeout because the train's passing through. Okay. I thought that was really funny until you look it up and find out that in the 30s and 40s during that time, that was a natural occurrence in Texas leagues. I thought that was interesting. But then it was the first note that I had was that, or the first real note that I had was that it's weird that the credits spread across the first 13 minutes.
Yeah, that is kind of weird.
Because it kept throwing. I know some people have a bug about that when it goes over, like, what am I supposed to be paying attention to, the credits or what's happening here? Yeah. And it's just weird because the story would go and then I'd forget there were credits because they were spread out so much. And then at like at 9 minutes and 13 seconds, it says production designer John Valone. And so, the credits are still going. And again, it goes 13 minutes in, and I get what they're doing. It doesn't say directed by Walter Hill until the situation is set up. You know what I mean? But that kind of threw me off for a little bit. You said that you thought it was funny because Rick Moranis showed up. I also thought it was funny that Lynn Shay shows up at the press conference. She's the sister of Robert Shay, who was the producer on Nightmare on Elm Street. And she is actually the teacher at the school for a little bit. So I thought that was funny too. I did like pointing out a lot of the credits. I like doing that. Like when I don't really recognize a movie and I see like a name like Lawrence Gordon, who produced Field of Dreams, I see like Joel Silver on it. You see Jerry Orbach show up. Oh, I know him. Or you see, Grand L. Bush. He's in Die Hard. He's one of the Johnsons, the FBI agents anyway, but he's the baseball player that, Monty strikes out at the beginning. So I like when, I recognize names. And again, Ry Cooder is he's done a few music scores for Walter Hill. So I thought, oh, that's cool. So I perk up when I see stuff like that, because then I'm like, oh, I can recognize this and I can get into these things. I like the Herschel Weingrod and what was the other screenwriter? I forget. Timothy Harris. They wrote Kindergarten Cop and they wrote Twins. So I like seeing their names. It's funny seeing Yakov Smirnoff show up. Saying his line, country, that kind of thing. And then the other thing that kept taking me out of the movie when we're talking about is like the Warren Cox character wore glasses, or the Angela character wore glasses, and they didn't plan it right because the reflection would bounce off of there, and you'd be like, whoa, and you'd lose their faces. And so that was like, well, that's a weird thing to have in a professional movie. It's like they didn't plan for that to happen. You know what I mean? And so I don't know. I just thought that was kind of a weird touch there. I did like that the Walter Hill's frame was constantly busy with stuff. There's never boring to look at. Yeah. And even like an artistic shot, at the end, Monty, when he tells Marilyn, the designer, I want you to design a room that I could die in. And at the end, he walks into that room that's like an office, and he walks right into the center of that red dot. And like, oh, it's very, what's the word I'm looking for? Like very, the parallel lines and stuff like that. So it was very well executed as a shot.
Okay.
So even when there's nothing going on, I thought it was kind of interesting.
I can see that. That's one thing that always bothered me too about this movie is I hated the final design. I always thought that's not a room I can die in. That was so boring. It was like, that's the worst, misuse of money in the whole movie, because that room is so, poorly designed, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So that always bothered me.
I think what was interesting is I think what she did is she sapped all of the personality out of that room. And so I think that's why he wanted to kind of die in there. The main thing, again, like I said, it's not a terrible movie. I just thought, and this is like, again, when you watch a movie like this, and I kind of see the point, but some of it was lost on me. Like toward the end, I was like, I can tell that I'm like, it's sad, but I can't really feel it. Like it didn't really hit a lot of its points that I recognize. Even at the end, when the Warren Cox character turns out to be the villain, I was like, oh, he's the main villain. But that wasn't a real through line all through the movie. He just seemed like another pawn in Monty's plans. Or I don't know, that there weren't a lot of real laughs. Like you see Richard Pryor and you see John Candy, and I expected there to be a lot of big laughs, but the only time I laughed was with the train. And I like the part where he buys that really expensive stamp. Yeah. And he sends it to the businessman. I thought I laughed out loud at that part, but then they did nothing with it. So I don't know. I didn't really like John Candy was energetic, but he didn't really have, other than the, I saw your wife on TV, to the baseball play. He doesn't really have a lot of lines that I expected there to be more funny stuff from John Candy and more funny stuff from Richard Pryor. So, and again, when I watch a movie like this and I'm like, well, maybe I didn't get it. You know what I mean? Like maybe this movie's lost on me. So I have to research it and do these other things. And then you read like the Ebert review, or you watch Siskel and Ebert and they're like, yeah, this movie, you think it'd be funnier, but it's not. It just doesn't hit the main points. And so my thing with the stamp, I thought, well, that was really funny, but is this a slob versus snob movie? Maybe I thought that would have involved me more, because I like that part. What if he kept trying to thwart their plans? Like they kept trying to be smarter than him, but then he came back and with an even better plan. And so that was more of a crowd pleasing thing, but they didn't do any of that.
I think that would have worked well.
Yeah. And again, I'm not the guy to say, well, you should have done this or you should have done that. I can only really function with what I see on the screen, but just watching it, like when you mentioned Brewster's Millions, and I'm like, Richard Pryor, John Candy, I'm going to have a great time. And so I watched it with a big smile on my face. And by the end, I was just kind of, I was like, well, okay, like I get what they're doing. I like the part where he does, the none of the above, he kind of outs the politicians, the two mayoral candidates, as not being the type that you want as your leaders. And he kind of upends that. And again, it ties in with everything that he does, which is a good screenwriting tactic. Everything that he does to try and accomplish his goal, it fails and it does the opposite. And then you're with him because he can't tell any of his real friends what's going on. He can't tell Angela what's happening. And so it kind of alienates, and you feel that. But I don't know, it just wasn't the laugh a minute experience that I wanted, or that I thought it was going to be or expected, which might be, again, that's on me. But I don't know. I think it's Siskel whose quote is, it's not what a movie's about, it's how the movie's about, which you can take any topic, but how does the movie approach it? How does the movie bring across its themes? And while I get what was going on, I just don't think it hit quite as hard as it needed to.
I can see what you're saying. Now, it was adapted from a novel. Have you read the novel? Do you know much about that?
I haven't. I know that this is it was the seventh. It was the seventh adaptation of this Brewster's Millions novel, and there's been 13 adaptations total, including some that were made in like India. But who is the author? It was George Barr McCutcheon wrote this novel, I think, in 1902, and it was such a hit it became a play. And then they made they made movie versions of it. I have them all here, like 1914, 1921, 1926, 1935, 1945, 54, 61, 85. They made it twice in 1985, one in India. Yeah. Other than this. And so you read that and you're like, how popular was the source material? You know what I mean? Even though I haven't
never read the novel, but I was actually surprised to find out that there were like so many Pryor films before the Pryor film. So
Yeah.
I actually got to watch the 1945 film today.
Okay.
And I will say that, you know, it's a lot different. The rules are a little bit different. But, you know, of those 6 Pryor films, I think I still enjoyed the 1985 Pryor film the best.
Okay. Why would you? What was? If you could give me a short mini review of the 1945.
Yeah, sure. It's more static than the Richard Pryor version. It's just the camera doesn't move. Like, you know, back in the day when they had like sound stages and the lights were all
they're on
you had the camera, you know, on a track and then dolly, and then it would just like push in or pull back or move, and the actors just had to block in the lines. It was really just dialogue heavy. There was like nothing to it really. It was still kind of fun. There were some funny lines here and there, and it was enjoyable to watch. But just like the 1985 version, there's no denouement. It just ends as soon as he wins. He like pushes his wife out the door, and then that's how the movie ends. And you're like, that's it. So I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense because the other one does the same thing.
Yeah, okay.
But
and it was who is it? Dennis O'Keefe was the main
Dennis
star.
O'Keefe,
How did he do as Monty?
He was fine. It was just I felt like he was just trying to do like a Jimmy Stewart impression because I kept imagining Jimmy Stewart in the role while I was watching it.
Okay.
And but he was fine.
Okay.
The eccentricness and the craziness that Richard Pryor brings to it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I'd rather watch that than watch a Jimmy Stewart impression.
Okay, which none of the O'Keefe version did. Okay,
Yeah.
and that's the only other version you'd seen of this.
That's it. I haven't seen the other ones. I know there's a Jack Benny version, but I haven't seen that one.
Right, and then reading about again the history, I think even Punky Brewster did a variation on this, where her dad had to spend like $1 million in the course of a day. So, like I said, I'm very familiar with the plot. I knew putting the movie on when we rented it on Amazon. I didn't read any of the synopsis because I find that's more interesting not knowing what a movie's about. And then as soon as the Hume Cronin character comes in, I like that as a touch. Sometimes the filmmaking, I notice there's a part where they're on the baseball field at the beginning and they're moving the camera from right to left to show the guys walking off. Okay. And then it cuts to the bar and the camera's still moving from right to left. I thought, oh, that's a cool movement match cut. And then I liked how the Hume Cronin, he's unlike the video, the home video quality, and then it cuts to actual footage, like film footage of it, but they keep the sound of the home video recording. I thought that was an interesting, and I did think it was charming or a little bit funny when they were able to interact with each other.
Yeah. Did that remind you of anything? It reminded me of the time when you asked some girl to a date or something and you couldn't be there. So you actually filmed you asking her out. And
Okay.
I had to like interact with you on screen. And so like I had to put the tape in and then you would like tell me to get out of the way or whatever. So that it reminded me of that. I thought that was kind of funny.
Huh. So maybe I had seen Brewster's Millions and I was just trying to rip that off for that for that date. Okay. Yeah. You got a good memory about that. But yeah, so I don't know. Some of the filmmaking was still good. I noticed there was there's always going to be a montage.
Right. There's always the newspaper spinning montage.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you like the newsreel, like where are they now, like the text scroll that they did that 3 times?
Like once in a while they would pop up like a quote from Spike or a quote from the news reporter, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I thought it was okay. I just felt like it was kind of sometimes out of place. Like you just kind of go, oh, we're reading text now,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it could have been planned a little better.
Okay. Yeah, there was, by the 3rd time it happens, you're like, okay, I guess that's a stylistic choice. But the first couple times you're like, I'm not used to this. Like, why wouldn't they do like a newspaper spin, and then show like a quote or something like that? I don't know. I just thought there was another interesting touch. Yeah, but like I said, it wasn't as funny as I thought it would be. The thing with the stamp, I thought they were onto something because again, that was the big laugh. But then it just went back to the same thing. So I don't know. What you mentioned before? You think the point of the movie is about him realizing that he doesn't like money,
or just the value of money?
Okay.
I appreciate what money.
And talking about how it's about what it's about. How well do you think it did with that theme?
I thought it was good. But then again, I'm not really looking for something like that with a movie like this. I'm just in it for the experience. And like I said in the beginning, I'm in it for what he's experiencing and how I can live that experience, while watching it, kind of like put myself in his shoes type of thing.
Yeah. And you're right. I liked how they laid out the ground rules. Like it was very concise and I understood exactly what the plan was and what he could do and what he couldn't do.
Yeah.
And they were doing it in a way that the dialogue was interesting enough that I was into it. It's like, okay, how would I do that? Like, how is he going to do this? And so, but then like, it took me a while to, oh, he's hiring people and he's paying them just to work for this month with him. But again, I get the point. Like the guy comes with that little crazy iceberg scheme, and then it actually works, and somebody comes in and buys it, and so his stocks go way up, and he has to keep selling all these things. And it looks like he's spending his money extravagantly, which is like what Angela kind of the Lynette McKee character, she kind of fights him on. Did you think it was interesting too that her hair's all up tight in a bun, and over the course of the movie it comes down? So
I did notice that.
So that was a nice touch too. Again, there are all these little nice touches. Again, it's Walter Hill, so I expect there to be some energy. I expect there to be some creativity in what he's shooting. And so I thought that was there. It wasn't like, we talked about it before, director coming in and not really having any personality that we recognize him for. That may be, especially with Explorers, talking about that. The last thing I want is to watch a Joe Dante movie and have it be completely and totally like dull. Because that's not what I watch a Joe Dante movie for. And Walter Hill, as a director, it had enough of that personality and enough of those filmmaking little treats, little nuggets that kept me engaged. But again, I think I get what it was doing. I just don't. It could have been so much funnier. I think I laughed maybe 3 times.
Okay.
During the course of the movie.
Well, I wanted to mention this too because I was curious about the numbers because I mean inflation is a thing now, and so I thought, well, what would the value of $30 million in 1985 be in 2021? And it turned out to be like $77 million. So if that had to happen today, you'd have to spend $77 million in 30 days. Oof. So could you do that?
My gosh. The prices of gas.
Yeah, there you go.
I guess you could fill up your car once and that would be what, like 3 million, something like that. I don't know. But yeah, that's funny. And maybe that's why, because I know when the original novel and then the adaptations of before this, like they only gave Brewster like $1 million that he had to spend.
Yeah, in the 1945 Dennis O'Keefe movie, he is given $1 million to spend in 2 months, and if he does it, he gets the $8 million or $7 million of the remainder of their inheritance. Yeah, and so he's got to spend $1 million in 2 months instead of 30 millions in 1 month or 77 million in 1 month.
Oh yeah, no, that would put your mind to work trying to spend more money there. And again, I did like that, when the reporter comes in at the end and he's like, we don't know where he went, like he's disappeared, and we've just watched him on this wild roller coaster. But something that he might enjoy is, these politicians, the mayoral candidates, they're not going to run, and so he's thrown this whole political thing upside down, and they're going to have to organize a new election. So it's like, you have made a difference. You have pointed out a lot of things to these people, even though he's not really there to see it. So again, I get what it was trying to do. I just wish it was a little more, I wanted it to be like, like stick it to him instead of kind of,
So I kind of see where you're going with this, but can you give me what you think? Should it be remembered or remade? What do you think?
Well, it's been remade 14 times. I think, I don't know. The only thing that this movie really has going for it is Richard Pryor. I think it does have those little bit of Walter Hill. It's not a strong Walter Hill movie. It's not a Streets of Fire. It's not a 48 Hours. It's not Crossroads like you talked about. It's a fine movie that it's not an embarrassment. And I think I said that up top is I don't dislike this movie. I just don't enjoy it very much. Okay. And when I put like and again, I think it's just because either it was lost on me, but I put it out there, like I screen capped a picture of it and I put it on Twitter, and I was like, how many people have seen this movie? Because this is the first time I've watched it. We had AKA Jeanette, who guested with us for Night Shift. She mentioned she loved how pained Richard Pryor's character was with every decision and how he kept succeeding despite his best efforts. Let's see, The Good, the Bad, and the Sequel, or sequels only. They said that, and again, people are just like, he said Brewster's Millions, Hackensack Bulls versus the Yankees. So they remember parts. Piecing Pod, he says that, it's been forever. So he's seen it. He wants to watch it again. At Sanchu73 mentioned something about it. AJ Howell mentioned something about it. Kevin the Critic, who we've had on, he's mentioned something about it. Christopher Herman. A lot of people, Chris Williams, I'm just going through all these people that I speak to on a regular basis. At Coloratura 1973, a lot of these people, they're mentioning that they've seen this movie and they like it a lot. So I don't want to take that away. Like, it's like with Nightmare on Elm Street, where I can see why people would like it, but to me, it's not quite the experience that I'd want to have. And so even if, I don't know, like I said, Richard Pryor is the only real draw, but I think he could be stronger. They could have a little more, like you said, of the talking directly to the audience. There could be a little more of him being Richard Pryor. And again, like I said, they could make it a slobs versus snob story. They could punch up all the things of him getting back at the bankers. And again, it's just stuff that would have made me more interested and enjoy the movie more. And it's not there. And so, they've remade it a bunch. Yeah, remake this again. Let's see what else we can do with the story.
I can definitely see how some of those things would improve the movie and the whole experience as a whole. But I still really enjoy just kind of like imagining what I would do with that kind of money. But I will say, I think it can be remade because it's been made so many times before. And I would like to see some modern day actors play this part and see what they put into it. Doesn't have to be like a comedian. Doesn't need to be like a Kevin Hart. It can be anybody. It could be, anybody who can like just get their spin on the take of the character and then kind of like, take it somewhere different maybe.
Yeah, you make an interesting point, because I think one of the main reasons why this story has been adapted so many times is it does put you in the character's shoes. There, it's updated because there's new, the financial state of the world at the time. You could plug different actors in and see how they'd react. It's just a story that you could do multiple things and different things with, because not every one character would react the same way that Richard Pryor's version of the Monty Brewster character would act. They might do other things. It would be interesting to see, kind of like, I don't know why I pulled this, probably because we talked about Nightmare on Elm Street earlier, but the Scream movies, it's like horror is always changing. It's always adapting. Every time a new like horror genre becomes the norm, why not make another Scream movie and make it about that? So they have this ability to take this movie franchise and adapt it for today over and over and over again. But, Scream just keeps with the same plot. There's another Scream coming out that's the same thing, it seems like. It's just a continuation of the same story. So Brewster's Millions could be like that. You could make it different, make it new, make it a statement on the state of the world every time.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure if we talked about an outro topic or not, but we don't have to have an outro topic if we don't want to.
Well, I wanted to talk about some John Candy stuff, so we didn't really talk about him too much, and maybe Richard Pryor. We'll come back and we'll talk about a few different things. But yeah, I think that'd be fun.
All right, that sounds good. So we'll see you back in a few minutes.
Okay.
Or a few seconds. Okay, we're back. So Darin, was there anything that we forgot? Anything that we should have mentioned in the meeting?
Yeah, one mistake I did, I realized it's not Siskel that said it's not what a movie's about, it's how it's about it. That was an Ebert quote. Okay. I should have known, like, when you grow up and Siskel and Ebert, like Ebert's the one, I think he was the person that was more in the public eye. He won the Pulitzer, and he just, he had the run in Chicago sometimes, and Siskel wasn't quite as prolific. So I think a lot of the time, maybe my brain's like, well, Ebert couldn't have done anything. Couldn't have done everything. So Siskel had to add something to it. So I think that's why I attributed that quote to him. But yeah, so it's Ebert that said that, it wasn't Siskel. I just wanted to correct that and not step on anybody's legacy.
We didn't really have a topic for our outro, and we kind of decided at the last minute to talk about our favorite John Candy film and also our favorite Richard Pryor film. Because we didn't really talk too much about John Candy during our episodes. We want to make sure we give him a shout out there. But I'll go ahead and go first because I told you, I think in text or on the phone or something about John Candy, one of my favorite movies that he's been in. And that is a movie called Delirious. I think it's 1991, I think. He plays a soap opera writer, and he gets hit on the head or in some kind of accident. And he ends up being in the show that he's been writing. but he has to keep writing it. So as he writes the show, everything happens as he's living it. And so if there's a typo, then things, happen. It's just, shenanigans all over the place. It's a really funny movie. And I think he has a really good job in that movie. So I'm going to pick Delirious.
Okay. I don't know if I've seen that. It's again, when you mention it sounds familiar. So maybe I have, it just didn't make that much of an impression, but you describing it now sounds really funny. So what I would pick, there's a movie called Only the Lonely that was made in 1990. Have you heard of this one?
Yeah. Is that Marissa Tomei? Is she in that too? Who else is in that one?
No, that is Ali Sheedy, who has the other part, and Maureen O'Hara, who most people will know from Miracle on 34th Street. But, the thing with John Candy, especially in Brewster's Millions, is, he's an overweight comedian. A lot of roles that he's in, they play up on that. Even Brewster's Millions did a little bit where they're at the restaurant for the first time, and John Candy, the character, is eating like crab, and he's talking with Joe Grafasi, and like he says, well, are you going to keep eating? He makes an eating joke. And so that's what a lot of times they did with John Candy. The thing that I love about Only the Lonely, again, it's not breaking any rules. It's not going to change your mind about how cinema is made. It's just, he's a Chicago cop that's got a very close relationship with his Irish mother, and he meets this girl played by Ali Sheedy and falls in love with her. And the movie is all about the friction and how the mom thinks that the girl's trying to, take him away from her. But the thing that's great about it is they never treat John Candy as a joke. They never treat his weight or his body shape as something that's to be made fun of. That's just what he is. And so when you watch the movie, you're like, John Candy, and again, this movie was directed by Chris Columbus, who did Home Alone in the first year Harry Potter. So he knows how to use his actors. But it's really, really charming watching this movie and realizing John Candy could be a romantic lead. This movie proves that he could be a romantic lead. He's still an attractive man. He's a charming man. Just he's not the statuesque like Matthew McConaughey type, but he could still be a charming lead in a movie. And I just love the way that it's just plays him straightforward and it never treats him as a joke. A lot of times that's really hard to do, like especially for character actors who don't have the classical Hollywood good looks. They have to treat him as like a comedic.
Yeah, I would say I actually enjoy those movies more when there's an unconventional leading man or someone who you wouldn't expect to be in that role, but he's playing that role. And I usually am, drawn towards those type of movies actually. So yeah, I could definitely do that.
Okay. So again, that was my favorite, John Candy, Only the Lonely.
Now with Richard Pryor, we talked about it a little bit in the movie. We didn't go too far into it, but this movie just cracks me up watching him play a blind man, and that's Hear No Evil, See No Evil. And of course, we had the Gene Wilder, Richard Pryor dynamic in that movie. And just the way Richard Pryor like has that stare when he's like blind and he can't see and everything. It's so funny. And not saying anything, just having the look on his face makes me laugh. And so I had to pick Hear No Evil, See No Evil.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good one. He's, again, when he's with Gene Wilder, that's a good comedy pairing, like Hope and Crosby. It's just like, these guys are great together. They play up each other really well. So that's a good thing. So I might pick something that's a little bit of a cheat. I know that we said at the beginning of the episode that Richard Pryor didn't really find his footing in movies as much as like an Eddie Murphy did. So the movie I'm going to pick is one of his concert movies. It's Richard Pryor Live on the Sunset Strip. And it highlights his gifts as a comedian, as a stand-up comedian. But what's great about it, like I mentioned before, is this came after the incident where he was freebasing cocaine and he poured rum on himself and set himself on fire. And so
hold on real quick. Did you know that he did it twice, right?
Twice?
He tried to do the show once and it bombed and no one was laughing. He was failing. And so he walked off stage, but then he promised to come back the next night and do it again. And so that what you're seeing is the very next night of the show. So the second attempt. So.
Okay. Well, what's great about it, I think that actually works in the movie's favor because this was his first public like show after that freebasing incident. And so he comes on and he's nervous about it. And, he's trying to find his footing. And it's like, it's like he knows that he can be funny, but he's been out of it for something. He's had that little embarrassing thing that happened to him. But by the end of that show, he's full on Richard Pryor again. He's talking about the race stuff. What I love most about it is he talks about the incident and he makes it funny. Light a match. And what is that? Oh, that's Richard Pryor running.
That's a pretty color blue.
Yeah, absolutely. And so he's very open with it. He's very, And that's what I mentioned. Even though he's talking about very hard-hitting and controversial topics, he does it in a way, and even though he uses some colorful, choice words, it's still very charming and likable, and you can identify with them, and it's just warm. That's hard to do. A lot of comedians, when they try to be confrontational, that's what they come off as. It's not funny, it's more shock tactics. And even though he does do a lot of things, and the words he uses and the topics that he talks about as shock tactics, he's still very open and warm and winning when he talks about that stuff. And so, again,
funny. He's
funny. Absolutely. Live on the Sunset Strip. I think that if you want to know Richard Pryor, that's you'll know him by the end of that show. So.
No, that's a good pick. That's a good movie.
Yeah. So that's my favorite.
All right. So I picked Brewster's Millions. So you're next up. What are we doing next time?
Okay. Well, this will be our annual, like we do this every year. Like this is our third season. So it's Christmas time. So we want to do a Christmas themed movie. And I wrestled with it. I wanted to do one that's like, you mentioned, we talked about maybe doing Die Hard, but again, that's number one, that's talked about a lot. Number two, that's not a Christmas movie. People will yell at us. And so I was trying to think of some movie that meant a lot to me as a kid, but again, trying to do it in a special way. I think I want to do the Chuck Jones, How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
Oh, okay.
The famous one from when we were kids. But I also, since I'm a big Dr. Seuss fan and I'm not really big on his film adaptations, let's also take a look at the Ron Howard, Jim Carrey, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the live action one.
Okay.
Just as
we're gonna watch two movies then.
Yeah. So obviously the cartoon is only like 20 or half an hour or something like that. But we can watch that and say what, this is Dr. Seuss's adaptation and this is live action, the 2-hour stretched out version of it. I don't know. I just think that would be interesting to kind of talk about the differences and what makes a good adaptation of something that's not really written and suited for adaptation.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, also it's Christmas. So yeah. Yay.
Yeah, why not? All right. So next time we'll do Dr. Seuss, How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And until then, I am Johnny Craddock.
And I'm Darin Lundberg.
And we'll see you next time.